FM News Talk 97.1.
On-demand audio.
Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North, he's the host of War Stories on the Fox News Channel, plus the author of American Heroes in Special Operations, and he's the founder and honorary chairman of Freedom Alliance, a foundation that provides college scholarships to the sons and daughters of service members killed or permanently disabled in the line of duty. And he very graciously joins us again on the phone. Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North, good afternoon. Thanks for joining me.
Dana, good afternoon to you, but it's a better afternoon for us than it is the Marines of the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit, which are now on their way to the Mediterranean.
Oh, my goodness. Tell us a little bit about some of the, I guess build-up is the right word for it, even though it's strictly on a humanitarian basis, yes?
Well, thus far, but it looks like the agreement that was just forged between British Prime Minister Cameron and Mr. Obama is going to lead to some kind of military action if Gaddafi doesn't step down, and I don't regard that to be particularly likely since he has no place to hide. He knows that he's wanted almost everywhere on the planet, and that if he does indeed flee, he's going to be, because he doesn't have a place like a palace outside of Riyadh to go to, he's going to end up standing trial in The Hague. So my guess is he stays till the bitter end, and the bitter end may well come as a consequence of U.S. and other allied military operations, though I cannot imagine how it's going to happen in the next few days.
Exactly. Could this be maybe the beginnings of a no-fly zone? I know it's something that the president, when he was speaking with the Australian Prime Minister very recently, he fielded a couple of questions from the White House press corps and saying that, well, it's something that we're thinking of. Is this becoming a more likely possibility? I know they really were pushing against it earlier.
Well, there's no doubt, and Secretary Gates at the Defense Department is still, even though he's on his way back from Afghanistan, is still standing up and saying, look, you can't just snap your fingers and make this happen. I don't find myself agreeing with members of this administration often, but I do agree with that observation on his part. I remember, and I know some of your listeners are old enough to remember that from 1991 until 2003, the United States enforced a UN-supported no-fly zone over northern and southern Iraq. That required us to put 2 carrier battle groups into the Persian Gulf continuously from 2002 all the way until 2003. It required hundreds of other air assets and other ground assets in neighboring countries, to include Turkey, which never acknowledged them, Saudi Arabia, which didn't want them there, and of course we ended up with Khobar Towers, and Kuwait and other places around the region to support intelligence collection, airborne command and control, the rescue operations that have to take place and be in place in the event an aircraft goes down, and all manner of support like tanker support to keep aircraft up and ordnance support on the ground. It is not something you can just snap your fingers and make happen. And unfortunately, there don't seem to be a lot of people inside the Oval Office or even in the five-sided building who understood that. At least Gates stood up and said, hey, just a doggone minute here, where do we get the assets?
Right.
They've now turned around the Enterprise Carrier Battle Group to send it back into the Mediterranean because in their infinite wisdom and lack of planning on the part of this administration, it's the first time in 31 years we didn't have a carrier battle group in the Mediterranean. And that meant aircraft that were going to be essential to knocking out Libyan anti-aircraft defenses and prosecuting the initial phase of this weren't even on scene. So you now have an additional Marine Expeditionary Unit being deployed, ordered out last night from Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. The 26th Marine Expeditionary Unit plussed up with another 500 Marines sent from Camp Lejeune earlier this week. You've got 3 amphibious ready groups that are being deployed or already deployed. And, of course, the Marines who were offloaded from the USS Kearsarge are now in Afghanistan. So the lack of planning on the part of this administration, when you think about what's transpired in that part of the world, North Africa and the rest of that part of the planet, because of their incredible ineptness, their indecision, has led to the point where you can't conduct military operations even if you wanted to.
This sounds like a mess, an absolute mess.
Dana, if I wrote that in one of my novels, people would say it's unbelievable. But in fact, it is believable in large part because of the extraordinary inexperience, ineptness, if you will, the ideological blinders being worn by this administration that, he can get up and say anything he wants and there are no consequences.
Right.
There are enormous consequences to the the presidency of the United States. Hopefully someday soon we'll have a commander-in-chief who knows that.
Exactly. Well, and this sort of pushes back against the narrative that some on the left have been kind of floating out there, where they don't believe that this would be a substantial military engagement to create a no-fly zone, when, in fact, it actually would. It would be.
Well, there was just a few moments ago, there was an observation by the British Prime Minister and the British Foreign Secretary. Apparently, Mr. Obama and Mr. Cameron spoke earlier this afternoon. And in the aftermath of that, the British Foreign Secretary came out and said, one of the requirements is that Gaddafi has to step down. The killing has to stop. And we need the support of other nations in the region, meaning another Arab country, at least one, where you could base those kinds of assets I described a few moments ago. And unfortunately, there's blissful ineptitude in the administration that just doesn't seem to understand this kind of thing.
Right.
Of course, what they did is they handed off the making of America's national security policy to the Congress of the United States, and you've got people like John Kerry,
good grief,
who's a well-known dove, now standing up saying we've got to enforce a no-fly zone, as though you get, like I say, snap your fingers and make it happen. You can't do it.
Does it surprise you that the same people who railed against the Bush Doctrine in Iraq are suddenly for the Bush Doctrine in Libya?
And I guess I've been around this town long enough not to be surprised at any of these characters say. But, yeah, you're absolutely correct. It's the very same people who railed against George W. Bush for talking about supporting the forces of democracy and the institutions of democracy. They attacked him for that. And, of course, for sending American troops to Afghanistan and Iraq. And now you've got the very same people who criticized George W. Bush out there saying, yeah, we got to send American troops, no-fly zones and all that. And so it's just going to happen. It won't just happen.
Right. There's been some discussion, too. I know that a British paper, The Independent, was saying that the administration was trying to put some pressure on the Saudi government to give some kind of support to the rebels fighting Gaddafi. And I just think, I look at this and I think that these are individuals who, they don't have the air support that Gaddafi does. And some of them, the weapons that they have, they fire poorly to begin with. But they've been able to do an awful lot on their own. It seems a little bit of hyperbole to bring us in to help them. They've been able to accomplish, and do whatever they've been and gain as much ground as they have on their own. What do you make of discussions where we should support the rebels and beef up their resistance?
Well, let's take this piece by piece here. What you just said about the rebels standing up to Gaddafi's superior military might is very true, and it's a demonstration, an indication as to how extraordinarily corrupt and brutal the Gaddafi regime has been. His conscript army is not adequate to the task for which he sent him out to do, and he's got defections from his military. Unfortunately, what you also have is the realization on the part of at least some in Libya that Gaddafi could well survive this experience. Now, between you and me, I didn't think Gaddafi'd stay this long. But
right.
because of the things that we've said, and now the Brits are saying about this man needs to be prosecuted, when you corner a rat, you got to leave him a way out. Even if you're going to chop his head off on the way out the door, you still got to leave him a way out. Gaddafi's unlikely to run at this point.
Well, we'll definitely be watching this. Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North, I appreciate you joining us again and giving us your absolutely valuable perspective on this. It's always a pleasure to have you on.
Always great to be with you. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North, and his website is olivernorth.com. Make sure you check out the War Stories. He's the host of that on the Fox News Channel, and his book, American Heroes in Special Operations.